Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. We are going to go through the performance tiers for Week 8. We are presented and brought to you by FanDuel. Appreciate you being here. We'll also check in on some of those FanDuel odds as we go through with each team in Week 8, how they performed, what we thought, and give the analysis there. Let's start with Ohio State. Ohio State wins, beating Wisconsin 34-0. This was the best team in all of college football, playing the worst team in the Big Ten, and Wisconsin played like it in this one. Julian Sayin was 36 of 42, 393 yards and 4 touchdowns, 86% completion percentage, insane. Isaiah West was the leading rusher, the true freshman who has hardly played this year. He had 9 attempts for 55 yards. He was gashing Wisconsin late in that game. The other true freshman, Bo Jackson, had 10 carries for 26 yards. There is some concern here about Ohio State's run offense, like the rushing offense, right? I mean, this is still a Wisconsin team that has a good run defense. I've talked about that all season long, but you cannot rely on a run defense to win you games when you have a totally inept offense, and that's what Wisconsin has right now. So Ohio State was able to pour it on. I think they started with like 6 or 7 passes in a row before they had their first run, and their first run was like a 1 yard gain or something like that. So it wasn't very much at all. In fact, I could probably go through here and see exactly how much. I don't need to do that. But anyway, you get what I'm saying, right? Like Ohio State needs to be able to run the ball. They're not doing a great job of it right now. Who knows? Maybe Isaiah West is the answer. He looked really good in this game, the way he was able to hit the hole and run hard. Some of that might also just be fresh legs because he hasn't ran hardly this season at all. And we didn't see any running from their second string running back or second string going into the year, James Peoples. I do not believe I saw him on the report there, but it is something to notice that Ohio State is working in more running backs here, and we'll see what happens in their next game to see if they do start working in more of an Isaiah West in addition to the other ones. Carnell Tate had a day, 6 receptions, 111 yards, 2 touchdowns. Go and watch the first touchdown Carnell Tate had. It was electric, a huge, huge catch, a rocket of a throw by Julian Sayin was just absolutely incredible. Jeremiah Smith, he had 9 receptions for 97 yards in this game, and then Brandon Inniss had 3 receptions for 26 yards. Ohio State overall had nearly 500 total yards of offense, nearly 400 passing yards in this game. 3 sacks, 7 tackles for loss. Just a really, really good game for Ohio State. Looked absolutely elite and did exactly what they're supposed to do against Wisconsin. And this one beat them 34-0, all while maintaining what they want to maintain, which is not having all that many plays. If you look and see how many plays they had, they did run 70 plays in this game, but still, that's a high number for Ohio State. They're running 60 to 65 plays per game. They only put on 5 more plays in this one, and by the time you were playing that, you had most of the starters out in this game, and you weren't having to do most of that stuff. They kept Julian Sayin in for, I believe, the entire game from what I saw, just to kind of give him more reps and continue to have him go. But overall, this is a really, really good Ohio State team. Wisconsin is in the awful department because Wisconsin is awful right now. They do not have an offense. They do not have a pass defense. Hunter Simmons is not the answer at quarterback, but then again, neither is anybody else on offense. You lost Dylan Dupree or Dylan Jones in this one. Dupree, he was already out. You tried to run the ball with, guy after guy after guy. You had Ituka, you had Yakameli, you had West. I mean, you were trying to run the ball with anybody you possibly could because and they were putting Danny O'Neal in this game. He also played against Iowa, so it wasn't anything they did specifically in this one. But Lance Mason remains pretty much your only wide receiver threat at this point. Vinny Anthony is a good wide receiver, but he's just not been utilized very much. Tret Kukumunga, Kukumunga. Kekahuna. he he has not been utilized very much because he just don't have a quarterback that can get it to those guys. Lance Mason had a couple catches for 31 yards in this game, but when you just don't have a passer, and your backup option was Danny O'Neal, who you thought, okay, well maybe he can be the guy of the future, and he's just not working out. It's really really unfortunate for Wisconsin right now, but they are solidly in that awful category for them. If you go to the odds, Ohio State currently number one in the national championship odds at plus 270. In the Heisman odds, Julian Sayin has moved up. He is now plus 410. He's only behind another Big Ten quarterback we'll talk about here soon, and then Ty Simpson of Alabama. Ty Simpson, I Bleav he had a good day from what I saw against Tennessee. Don't quote me on that. There's other guys up there as well. Marcel Reed from Texas A&M, Gunnar Stockton from Georgia, Diego Pavia from Vanderbilt. It would be stupid if any of those guys got the award over Julian Sayin, Ty Simpson, or the other Big Ten QB I'll mention here in a moment. Those three have obviously separated themselves as the best QBs in college football. Jeremiah Love could increase a little bit after him having a good day, but Jeremiah Smith continues to fall as he just doesn't have as much production as you would probably need to win an award like that as a wide receiver. Because, Ohio State has Carnell Tate right now, just doing a really good job, and there's so much attention going to Jeremiah Smith that it's just easy at this point to go to Carnell Tate. So really, really good stuff there from Ohio State. Let's move on to Oregon, as Oregon blew out Rutgers 56-10. Oregon was dominant in this game. Dante Moore had himself a day as well, 15 of 20, 290 yards, 4 touchdowns. He did have one pick, but you had Thomas going there as well. He was 3 for 4 for 45 yards. Noah Whittington, 11 attempts, 125 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end, was the leading receiver, 4 catches for 80 yards, 2 touchdowns as well. Oregon had 750 total yards of offense in this game. If you want to talk about a statement to prove that your offense isn't broken, that's what Oregon did this game. Now, they only scored 56 points, but man, they just moved the ball up and down the field and did whatever they wanted to do, even with 2 interceptions by Athan Kaliakmanis. Oregon did have a fumble on the very first drive. It was 3 and out because of the fumble, but they did have a fumble. I Bleav was it the hold on one second. Yeah, it was Gary Bryant Jr. had a fumble on 3rd down in that one, and Rutgers was able to recover it, but they went 3 plays and they kicked a field goal right away after that, and that would be basically all Rutgers did for pretty much the rest of the game until they got a late game touchdown toward the end of it. So really good performance here by Oregon, held Rutgers to only 200 total yards for their offense, and as we talked about before, this is not exactly an easy Rutgers offense to stop, so I thought maybe Rutgers could score a little bit in this game, but Oregon shut them down completely, took away their will to even play the game. Excellent elite performance by Oregon, not by Rutgers though. Rutgers gets the awful performance in this one. You have to, when the wide receivers and your quarterback are your strongest part of the game, you have to throw for more than 80 yards passing. Athan Kaliakmanis only had 79 yards passing in this game, 2 interceptions. They did run the ball a little bit, Raymond and Benjamin, but eventually they just got to that because they just wanted the game to be over. But Oregon was going to continue to move the ball on them because their defense just couldn't stop them. So KJ Duff did have 3 receptions for 41 yards, and DT Sheffield did have 3 receptions for 26 yards, but it was not a pretty performance at all for Rutgers. Oregon walks away with 3 sacks. Elite for Oregon, awful performance for Rutgers. All right, moving on. Let's go to Michigan, as Michigan had an elite performance, in my opinion, against Washington here. Now, this was a close game at halftime, but Michigan did eventually pull away into the 4th quarter as they were dominating the game, and eventually Washington just beat themselves. And I say that because they hurt themselves in this game, but Michigan took the opportunities and looked elite with them. So Damon Williams Jr., he was 20 of 32, 209 yards, 3 interceptions. Bryce Underwood threw for over 200 yards in this game, 2 touchdown passes. In addition to that, Justice Haynes did not play in this game, and Washington had Jacob Manu and Zach Durfee back in this one, but it did not matter as Jordan Marshall ran for 133 yards and 1 touchdown. Andrew Marsh was also really, really impactful. They had multiple tight ends. Zach Marshall, Deacon Tonally, I Bleav is how you pronounce it. Donovan McCulley, he only had 21 yards receiving, but he was utilized in some different ways. And I think this Michigan offense is starting to find their stride a little bit more. You could tell this was a team that really got challenged this week in practice. And, there were kind of the memes going around out there with Sharon Moore and the work jacket and everything like that. But this was a team that got the message this week and responded. They continue to take a little bit of time in the first half and then kind of come back in the second half. I do think that's something that Michigan needs to fix. They cannot just keep going on with that, in my opinion, but this is still a performance where they absolutely shut down one of the best offenses in the nation. Defense, it was really impressive. Damon Williams got his a few times, but overall 3 interceptions by him and bad red zone play for Washington as Washington scored on one of their 2 trips to the red zone. They had a missed field. I Bleav they were in the red zone for the missed field goal as well. Michigan 2 sacks contained Damon Williams. Damon Williams had 5 carries for minus 19 yards in this one. Like I said, 2 of those were sacks by Michigan. Excellent elite performance by Michigan. Concerning performance for Washington, in my opinion. Not going to say awful, but definitely a concerning performance because this is a team that seems like they are either boom or bust at this point. You go up against Rutgers, complete boom, great game. That's a bad defense though, and they were on the road. You go up against Maryland, it's a bust all game, and then the fourth quarter you boom and you win the game. That's excellent. But what are you going to be when you get into these big kind of matchups? And Washington needs to figure that out. They need to be able to play consistently in these big matchups, and I just don't think that I'm going to be able to trust Washington until they show it to me that they can play in these type of big matchups. And it is a big matchup against Michigan. Michigan's going to be ranked after this. USC probably won't be ranked, and Michigan probably will be ranked, and that's kind of how it goes there. So if we look at the conference winner odds, Michigan looks like they're still in 4th. They are plus 2,000, Oregon plus 1,000, and then it's Indiana, Ohio State that are up at the top. Ohio State is minus 160. Indiana on FanDuel is plus 195 at this point. Washington, they're losing out on their odds to make the playoffs. Their odds were, I Bleav, 720 last week. They are plus 2,200 now. So it looks like Washington has missed out on their opportunity to make the playoffs after losing this game, and probably not just losing this game, but in the manner in which they lost this game as well. They would have to win out if they want to have an opportunity to make the playoffs after this one, and I think that's concerning for Washington fans. All right, let's move on to Minnesota as Minnesota crushes Nebraska in this one. We'll get to Nebraska in a second. Kind of went over this in our live stream, though, but Drake Lindsey, his stats won't jump out at you, but he was efficient, did a really good job in this game. 16 of 20, 153 yards, 1 touchdown pass. Darius Taylor, 24 carries, 148 yards, 1 touchdown in this one as well. The big thing was the Minnesota defense, which had 9 sacks in this game. They were able to control the ball as well. Sack adjusted rushing yards. Minnesota had 188 on the day. They were 5 for 12 on third down. And when they got to the red zone, a perfect 4 for 4. They were able to move the ball and they were able to capitalize once they got into the red zone. And one of the reasons why this is an elite performance for Minnesota is because this was supposed to be a better Nebraska team than what they showed in this one. Now, you could argue Nebraska is just not good. Maybe that is the case, but Minnesota got everything they wanted to get in this one. Nebraska took an early field goal lead. Minnesota took it right back, and then the second half was completely all Minnesota, as not a single drive was even in scoring position there for Nebraska, because Nebraska, I'll just go through their drive chart. In the second half, it was punt, 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 turnover on downs. I guess I shouldn't say that, not a single one. They were on the 37 of Minnesota, so you could have, I guess, technically tried a field goal there if you wanted to, but that was late into the fourth quarter. So they weren't going to try for a field goal there, and then Nebraska at the end of the game, that was their final drive when they turned it over on downs. Minnesota, on the other hand, touchdown, interception. They responded well to that, and then touchdown field goal, which put them over the top. Great game by Minnesota. Awful performance here by Nebraska. Nebraska has seen the issues all season long. with their offensive line, with Dylan Raiola getting sacked. He leads the nation in sacks right now, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to double check that tomorrow because I don't think the stats are out unless somebody else got a whole bunch of sacks at this point. But Dylan Raiola is getting sacked left and right. He does not have the step. He does not have the mobility to be able to get out of pressure. It's really, really unfortunate for him. And right now, it just, with bad offensive line play, bad, running back pass blocking, bad first step by Dylan Raiola, he's going to be susceptible back there all season long. And it's going to be something I'm sure more teams are going to start trying to take advantage of, because anytime you see a team get 9 sacks or have 9 sacks on them in one game, it's just simply not good. So I'm going to do awful. I was going to do concerning there for Nebraska, but this was more than just concerning. This was an awful performance by Nebraska, and I think that a lot of Nebraska fans are very upset after this one, as they should be. I would be very upset as well. All right, let's go on to Northwestern and Purdue, as Northwestern wins 19-0 over Purdue. I do think this shutout over Purdue is probably more. I do believe that this shutout by Northwestern here is more impressive than some people are going to give them credit for. Yes, Northwestern was at home, but let's also be clear, that's not a super good home advantage or anything like that. And then Purdue has shown some good offensive ability this season. Malachi Singleton had to come in later in the game and take over, and he did some nice things with his feet. He may have been, or Malachi Singleton, Malachi Thomas. I apologize. He was the one that came in and was the leading rusher after Devin not after Devin Mockabee was the starter. Malachi Thomas was the one that came in and became the leading rusher, 7 attempts for 34 yards. It was Malachi Singleton that came in and relieved Ryan Brown in this one. And he was 11 of 20, 187 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 incompletion. Preston Stone was 11 of 26. He's still not very accurate, not very efficient. I do think he's improving. He is throwing the ball away, which contributes to that a little bit. But still, this is a portion of the offense that just is not getting a whole lot better at this point. They've had glimpses where they've looked better, but at this point, it's just not looked great for them. So that's why I have Northwestern just in the satisfied category. I think if you wanted to be more than satisfied, you would need to see some better offense here. But they are running the ball well, 232 yards on the ground in this one. And I do not believe Preston Stone was sacked. So yeah, that's sack adjusted because he was not sacked. But this was a game where Northwestern dominated time possession, nearly 40 minutes of possession in this one for them, and they played really strong defense, and Purdue just was not able to make anything happen. So satisfied performance for Northwestern. Would like to see some more out of the offense, and then awful performance by Purdue here. Ryan Brown was not good in this game. The running game did not exceed 100 yards in this one, and Purdue just looked kind of lost out there all game. They did pass the ball pretty well. They had over 200 yards passing on the day as a team, but it still wasn't anything spectacular. And I think it's something that Purdue, is going to be really, really concerned with. I still think this Purdue team is going to upset a Big Ten team at some point during the season. But yeah, definitely didn't happen in this one. It was not a good performance by Purdue at all. All right, let's move on to Iowa, Penn State. I have both Iowa and Penn State in the satisfied category because I think Iowa fans should be satisfied. Their team obviously came out with the win at Kinnick. I think that that one was a little bit more in question, but they stayed patient. They made the course. Mark Gronowski only had 68 yards passing in this one and 1 interception, but he had 130 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. Kamari Moulton had 99 yards on the ground, and then Kane Wetjen, he had 3 carries for 7 yards and 1 touchdown in this game. So Iowa continues to be able to move the ball on the ground, and they really never got into a situation where they weren't able to do that. And I do think that that's something that satisfies you as Iowa, but the passing game still does not look fixed, right? They were able to pass the ball well against, who was it, Wisconsin and Rutgers, so that made you feel better, but Wisconsin and Rutgers are 2 of the worst passing defenses in the Big Ten, so that's not something where you're going to say, the passing game is fixed. It's not fixed. Mark Gronowski continues to struggle passing the ball. It's definitely something that is going to need to be better if they want to defeat Oregon later on in the season. And I do think that should be Iowa's goal, is to defeat Oregon, because if you defeat them and you win out the rest of the season, you're going to be able to make the playoffs if that happens. I have my reservations about that happening, but who knows? Anything could happen. So, but ultimately, even if they lose that game, they still have the opportunity to go 9-3 here, defeat their rivals, and that's a really good season for Iowa and their fans, and they would be satisfied with that. So, satisfied with Iowa in this one. Also satisfied with Penn State. Katron Allen had 28 carries in this game. Ethan Grunkmeyer, he did have 15 of 28, 93 yards and 2 interceptions. So you could put that in the questionable category, but I think any Penn State fan knew that was something that was going to be questionable in this game, is Ethan Grunkemeyer. So I'm not going to put it in that category. What I am going to put in there is that it looks like Terry Smith came in and made the changes that needed to be made for this team. I would have loved to see what this team could have done with Drew Aller in there, with the changes that Terry Smith made, specifically Katron Allen, some of the defensive stuff they did. It did look like the guys were playing faster and more controlled out there, but we'll see. We'll have to see what the future looks like. Unfortunately for Penn State, they have at Ohio State and Indiana both coming up. They have a bye, and then they have those, so it's going to be tough for Penn State. But they are showing improvement. I do think that deserves recognition as well. All right, let's go to Indiana and Michigan State. So Indiana and Michigan State, this was a bit more of a game at the beginning. Michigan State held with Indiana for a little bit. If I go to the scoring here, then Michigan State was up at 1.7 or 10-7 on this one, and then in the second quarter, about halfway through, Indiana scores, and then they score at the end of the second quarter, and then the third quarter is when they take off, and then they score one more time in the fourth quarter. Michigan State gets a field goal at the end of the game, but this was still some nice fight to see from Michigan State at the beginning of it. I did not think this Michigan State team was going to score over 10 points in this game, but they proved me wrong. So congrats to Michigan State. I'm not going to label them in the awful category, because I did think that they showed some improvement. In fact, I'm not even going to put them in the concerning category. I'm going to put them in the questionable, because there was stuff in this game that we saw from Michigan State that was like, okay, well, why haven't we seen that in other games, right? You can show that against Indiana, that's fine, but if you would have shown this against Nebraska, if you would have shown this against UCLA, you could have won those games. In fact, you should have probably won those games if you were going to play like you did at the beginning of this game against Indiana. But just haven't seen that consistency from Michigan State this season, and it is concerning in my opinion, but it's also kind of questionable now coming out of this game, because you've seen it, right? It's like, okay, we know this is there. It's less about concern of if it is there, and it's more about question of why is it not there more often. I know I'm being very vague, but if you watch the game, I think you kind of understand what I'm getting at with Aiden Childs, the offensive line, some of that stuff, because Aiden Childs was 27 of 33 in this game for 243 yards. The other Heisman Big Ten player I was talking about, and this one was Fernando Mendoza, 24 of 28, 332 yards, 4 touchdown passes. Probably should have been 5, but 4 touchdown passes. Keelan Black had 10 attempts for 64 yards and a touchdown. And this one, Indiana went crazy on offense. The reason I have them in satisfied and not elite is because of the defense, right? This is an Aiden Childs that has struggled against worse defenses so far this year. I know Michigan State only scored 13, and I do think that there's something to be said about that. But this is also an offense that you should not have been giving up points to and been down against in the second quarter. I know that's a high standard, but man, if you want to be the Ohio States of the world, Indiana, if you want to be a top 3, top 2 team in the nation, this is the kind of nitpicky critiques that you get, right? And I think that that's kind of where I'm going to start judging Kirk Cinetti. Are you an elite team? It's not just the plucky Indiana Hoosiers, what do they look like? It's, are you an elite team or are you not? And I do think Indiana is, obviously, but just in this week, I didn't think that they looked elite the entire time. But if I'm betting anything, it's that Kirk Cinetti kind of likes that, because it's a way for him to kind of light a fire under his guys and make them, say, hey, look, you guys have not arrived yet. You keep working, because we're going to see more good offenses out there. So good on Kirk Cinetti. Good stuff there. All right, moving on to did Indiana, UCLA. Let's move on to UCLA and Maryland. Oh boy, sorry Maryland fans. This is tough. Let's talk UCLA first. Nico Imaliava is 21 of 35, 221 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. So I did give UCLA the satisfied here. I was going to give them questionable, but I was like, this is still a team that is going to be 3-4. At this point, you're just happy that UCLA is winning. Yes, they beat Michigan State. Yes, they beat Penn State. But at this point, you're just happy that UCLA is continuing to win. And it was a tough spot at the end of the game. So I'm not going to put them in the questionable category. I'm going to put them in the satisfied category. I think you have to be satisfied if you're a UCLA fan. Should you have won by more points in this game? Yes, you probably should have. But you didn't, and that's okay because you still won the game. Maryland, on the other hand, I don't think it was concerning performance. They had it tied in the fourth quarter with 40 seconds left. I just think it's concerning from the standpoint of another time where they lost it in the fourth quarter. They lost in the fourth quarter against Washington. They lost in the fourth quarter against Nebraska. And then here they tie it up with 40 seconds left and they let UCLA drive right down the field, get into the red zone, kick a field goal there with time expiring to win the game. It's not so much a concerning performance in week 8. It's just kind of like the past weeks compounding on top of each other that makes it concerning because it's like, are we ever going to win a game in the fourth quarter, or do we just have to blow out teams to get to that point? Malik Washington was 23 of 48, 210 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. And this one, he did run for 67 yards as well. But this was one for Maryland. It was kind of a heartbreaker in some instances, and it does lead you to question. We were talking about it on the power ranking show, the targeting and stuff like that, which is so difficult to pin down as like a discipline thing or not. Like it's just such a difficult thing to try and pin down, but definitely something Maryland needs to get figured out. They had the one against Sydney Stewart a couple weeks ago. They had the one in this game against Jalen Husky. It's something they have to figure out. So there's too much in this one to not say concerning for Maryland, in my opinion. All right, let's move on to, I think, the very last game, which is USC Notre Dame. Yeah, we got Penn State, we did Oregon, we did Minnesota, Michigan, Northwest. Yep. All right, very last game, Notre Dame USC. I thought about putting concerning for USC, but I did not because I think some of the stuff that you saw in this game is what you've seen from USC. Maybe not just this season, but other seasons as well, right? The trick play with Malachi Lemon where he fumbles it because he was going to throw the ball. Bad play call, in my opinion. I don't know why you take the ball out of Jaden Mayava's hands there and do that. You had what was the other play? I'm blanking off the top of my head, but there's just too much kind of cute stuff in this game and not the best clock management once again from Lincoln Riley. So it's more questionable of like, when are we going to rectify these things rather than concerning of like, oh my gosh, are these things going to stay? Because they have been. So I guess you could argue concerning there, but for USC, they were in this game. They did a really good job against CJ Carr. Like everybody's going to point to Jeremiah Love in this one, who had 228 yards rushing and 1 touchdown, and Jadarian Price had 87 yards and 1 touchdown as well. Everybody's going to point to that stuff, but this is still a USC team that should have been able to hang. And honestly, if it wasn't for some of the play calls, I think they would have been able to hang on the scoreboard with Notre Dame more in this one. And I do think that they deserve credit for being able to stop CJ Carr, because that's all we heard was how great CJ Carr was going into this game. But USC was able to get 1 sack. They were able to disrupt him back there, and Notre Dame was 4 for 7 in the red zone in this one. So good job by USC, but I don't think fans are satisfied with it, because this is a game where if you didn't have some of those play calls and stuff, you could have possibly won the game. All right, those are my performance tiers for the Big Ten in Week 8. Let me know your thoughts. Where would you have teams? Do I have teams at a spot where you wouldn't have them? Where would you place them? Love to know your thoughts. Please do like and subscribe. Definitely appreciate FanDuel for being the presenting sponsor here for the show, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one.